Welcome, everyone, to Heal with Dawnna. Today, I am talking with the fabulous Melinda Kaufman, aka the ADHD Artist. Um, well, I don't even know where to begin to introduce you because we just had a great, fabulous chat that I hope we get to some of the things while we're recording because we just had such an amazing conversation. So I want to start then with tell us about yourself. What is the ADHD artist? What work do you create? And I'll just let you go.
All right.
I know
So
you're a talker too, so this will work out great.
there you go. So I'll give you a little bit of background. So I grew up in California, and I started my first job was as a professional horse trainer. Did that for a few years. And then I worked in retail on and off for 25, 30 years. And really enjoy retail, but also needed to take a break every once in a while. And I've always been crafty. So my mom taught me how to knit. I learned how to crochet. My mom taught me how to weave. Periodically I'd pick up painting or drawing, but I was terrible at don't ask me to draw a person. I can't. I can't.
Right there with you.
And so for the longest time, I did not think of myself as an artist. I was maybe a crafter. I was creative, but I didn't think of myself as an artist. And it wasn't until, gosh, I'm 52 this year, be 53 in November. Um, and I've always been a person that's going to go all over the place, but I've always been a person that had like 12 crafts going on and I never finished anything. And I started reading a few years ago about ADHD and it was starting to pop up like in my Facebook feed. And so I did a little research and I was like, gosh, this sounds like me. That sounds an awful lot like me. I do a lot of those things. And I asked people along the way and they're like, oh, maybe, who cares, whatever. And finally, when I was 50 years old, I asked a therapist I was working with, I said, do you think I have ADHD? And he goes, well, let's do the test. And so we did the test, and he goes, yeah, you definitely have ADHD. And so I did a little more research, and all of a sudden, my brain kind of flipped. And I realized that having a bunch of unfinished projects going on all at the same time and having a bunch of different interests and then, putting it away for sometimes years at a time and then dragging it all back out. It's just how my brain works. And it's okay because that's how my brain works. And so that thing that my mom always used to say of, finish what you started and whatever, I don't have to. I don't have to. I'm a grown up. I don't have to do that anymore, you know?
Now, as I hear you say this, I have to, I guess it's an assumption, but just the with such like a deep sigh and finally letting that load off from you, I have to imagine that the messages you grew up with about finish what you started, that there was a dialogue that you had that you were either that it was shameful or bad or there was something wrong with you. Did you can you maybe tell us a little bit about that and like kind
Yeah,
of how the diagnosis helped or change
I mean, I think
those
there was
messages?
some of that. I think there was always that underlying message of, finish the project before you move on to something else, right? But at the same time, I'm pretty sure my mom has ADHD. She's never been diagnosed. And so some of the things were, she did. So she could only come down on me so hard when I didn't finish a project or something, when she had an unfinished Christmas stocking in her, knitting bag for, I don't know, 30 years. The same project was on the loom in the house for my entire childhood, like, and it was unfinished. Like, so, I can only, I can only listen to my mom saying stuff like that for so long when I'm seeing the opposite, so there's a little bit of that. So it wasn't really bad, but there was always some of that thought in the back, like, well, if I wanted to buy, and it always came out in this way, I wanted to buy new craft supplies, right? Or I wanted to try some new craft. And my mom would say, well, why don't you finish that project you were working on that we bought all that craft supplies for, months ago, weeks ago, whatever it was. Um, but, she also, if we walked into a yarn store, she was buying yarn. Like, no project in mind, no specific. She was going to buy the yarn. Like, that was just how it was.
I have to say, it's funny that you mentioned like the craft supplies and everything. Even people I don't consider that they have ADHD, all crafters have that one thing in common. It's like, I am definitely going to go full bore with this. I'm going to spend $300 on all these supplies and then decide either I don't like it or it's going to get shoved in my craft supply closet. Like, I think every crafter, every artist can universally say that.
Yes, I think there's a lot of that. I know of a very small number of crafters who only buy what they need for the project they're making and then go out and buy and finish that and then go do something else and, don't have hordes of yarn and beads and paint and who knows what else. But they are sort of few and far between. I learned about ADHD, and I knew this years ago, was, working in retail, I always had a messy desk, right? And my managers would come through and go, oh my God, one manager said, you're going to clean it off with a snow shovel? Like, what are we going to do here? And one of the things I knew about it was I would make connections about things just because they were sitting on my desk. I would see something over here and something over here and say, oh, well, what if we did this? And so I would come up with ideas and thoughts that, were sort of a result of the desk being messy. So and I always knew exactly where everything was on the desk. Like, that's a classic ADHD symptom. Messy desk, but you know exactly where everything is, right? So I always had that. So I knew that the ADHD allowed me to see connections where maybe other people didn't see the connections. And sometimes it was because my desk was messy. Sometimes it's because my brain just works that way. And so when I started really diving into art, which was really during COVID,
Wow, that recent.
yeah, and I'd always done stuff. There was always something, multiple somethings, but really digging in during COVID, and all of a sudden I was making connections and putting together techniques that you might not think to combine, right? So, I do a lot of mixed media stuff that combines a painting that's the background, and then maybe I'll do some foiling on something. I might do some decoupage on it. I might, paint something. I might use a stencil to create something because I can't draw, right? I can't do that. So if I want, a fairy, I'm gonna get a stencil for it. That's just how it's gonna work.
Right.
Um, so learning how to combine these different techniques, I think does come from the ADHD, very much so. But the diagnosis was a bit of a breakthrough because it did allow me to say, this is how my brain works. And it's okay to have a bunch of different projects going. So I actually set up in my garage several different workbenches, and I do different things on different workbenches, and it changes and things move around and I make a mess. And then I have, a friend come over and help me clean it all up, a very non-judgmental friend who understands, whose dad is also an ADHD artist. And so completely understands that we all just make a mess and then we got to clean it up. Um, and so I named the business when I moved back to New York. I named the business the ADHD Artist because that was partially as an explanation for why when I go to an art show, my booth has paintings and decoupage and jewelry and mixed media and knit and woven and crochet and I don't even know what else, resin pieces. Like
Can
it's
I
just
plug you for a
insane.
second?
Yes, go right ahead.
I actually was her beautiful assistant at a art
Yes,
show
yes,
just
you were.
recently. And I have to say, I mean, she has gorgeous blankets. There's a beautiful wedding dress, knit wedding dress. Um, and I mean, there's plates, just absolutely, if you're looking for some Christmas or sunflower plates, absolutely gorgeous. She has beautiful rings, pendants, necklaces, earrings. Not to mention all the paintings. You also have those worry stones,
Yeah.
which I thought was really resourceful of you. Because did you want to explain that what you
Yeah,
do?
so when I'm working with resin, which I do on a fair amount in various different ways, I take my leftover resin and I pour it into a mold that for worry stones. And so I end up with all these little worry stones that I sell for a couple of dollars that, if you're ADHD or you have autism, you know how lovely it is to have something in your pocket to just rub on and keep you busy and in sort of a touchstone um, to keep with you.
Where do you draw your inspiration? Because you do have so much. Does it just kind of pop into your head, or do you draw inspiration from different sources?
I draw inspiration from a lot of different sources. So I am a super nature loving person. So I like to go walk around in nature. I'm sort of trying to turn my backyard into sort of a secret garden type um inspiration. And so sometimes it's from nature. A lot of times I watch way too much YouTube, and YouTube takes me here, there, and everywhere as far as art. I follow some wonderful artists on YouTube that make jewelry, that paint, that do all sorts of different things. And then watching their videos, other things pop up in my feed, and so I get inspiration from that. And so a lot of times I'll see a technique and be like, oh, I should try that. And yes, I do go out and spend a couple $100 on craft supplies that I don't have because I got to try this new technique and then see if I like
Judge-free
it.
zone right there with
Yeah, so so I do a lot of that. And I do try. I'm not always successful, but I do try if I decide that that's just not for me to, get rid of the supplies. But I also will buy supplies just walking through a store, and it can be an art store, it can be a yarn store, it could be almost anything, fabric store, and I'll see something and say, "Ooh, I should make something out of that because it's pretty and it's interesting and I like it." And so I'll buy some. And yes, I always buy too much. Um, because I don't want to run out, it's how it is.
right.
And but I'll buy something and I may put it away for months on end because I'm not quite sure what I'm going to do with it or what else I need to make that work the way I want it to work. I may, search YouTube for other people who have done something similar to what I have in my mind. Um, and so I get inspiration from everywhere. Like somebody might say something and I'll be like, "Oh, that's a good idea." Or, sometimes I just go out and mix up a bunch of paint and I'm just like, I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm doing something. I love to play with texture, so I'm really experimenting a lot right now with textured paintings and things like that. Um, so it just comes from everywhere. It comes from everywhere, and I'll go. Last fall, I spent weeks making jewelry. That was all I was doing was making jewelry and jewelry and jewelry. I haven't been in my jewelry room for months now because I just haven't had the inspiration, and I've got a couple projects that are sort of half finished. But I'm still a lot of times I have to sort of sit on something. I have an idea, but it's not complete. and I don't want to start it until I have the idea formed in my head. So I'll just let it stew in the back of my head for a long time, and eventually it comes back to the forefront and it's a complete idea. And I do the same thing when I'm writing. So I was an English major in college, and I would get an idea in my head, sit on it, have, words and phrases and paragraphs running through my head. And the night before it was due, sit down and write out a 30-page paper. Don't ask me to sit down and write it before that. I can't do it until that pressure's on
Right.
of the last minute. It's got to be done. But I can knock out a good paper because I've been thinking about it for 3 weeks and I knew where I was going and what I was doing with it.
See, that's interesting because I also, well, I actually, my actual diagnosis is ADD, but I'm impulsive. Like I'm like, I have this idea, strike while the, iron's hot. And then probably in a week, see, because you can like, put it on hold and come back to it. Me, I'm never coming back to it. It was a moment and it's over and I'm moving on.
So I too have the same problem, but what happens is I have the impulse, I buy the supplies. By the time the supplies come, the impulse is gone. And so then it has to sit on hold because that impulse that I had 3 days ago, 4 days ago, 5 days ago is past and I'm on to some other thing. And so, it has to sit until that impulse comes back around. And then I can pick it up again and do it. So yeah, impulsivity, big problem.
I wanted to talk just because it is Heal with Dawnna. How have you found art has helped with your, your healing journey, your mental health, your spiritual health, like just all kind of the areas of health? How have you found that creating art has helped that?
I think creating art for me is hugely helpful. Um, and I find myself doing different things based on how I'm feeling. So certainly during the winter in particular, but even during the summer, if I'm feeling down and depressed and just want to sit on the couch, I'll try to at least make sure that I grab some yarn and a crochet hook or some knitting needles and sit down and have something going so that my hands are going and I'm creating. And then when I finish it, that feels really good that I accomplished something. And so that can help boost my mood. Um, when you'll see me picking out different paint colors depending on my mood. Sometimes my paints are very, the paintings can be very black and red, and, you know, there's some
Right.
anger in there and whatever. And sometimes they're very nature based and lots of greens and blue. I use a lot of green and blue and purple. But, I have all those other colors there, for when it needs to be a little more fiery or a little more, I love my metallics. We were talking earlier, I love my glitter in my mixed media
Right
pieces.
there with you.
It's
Yeah.
just, it's got to be in there. So yeah, I think there is, and I don't know that I've tracked it as well as I've tracked sort of just my ADHD diagnosis, but I think if somebody really paid attention, you could probably see a pretty strong, um, lost the word, connection between what I'm making, the colors I'm using, and what my mood is. Um, I think that you would see a strong connection there. Um, so, but making art, and then my rule is I have to take art to sell at shows at least periodically. I have
Right.
to try and sell some of it. I can't afford to not sell some of it. So that's really important. Like I'm not working at the moment. I gotta sell some of it. But the other thing I've discovered is that the art that I don't love sometimes is the art that sells the first. And it's really crazy. So my mom encouraged me at one of my first shows to take a bowl that I was like, ugh, I can't stand it. I don't like it. Is sold within 2 hours. A painting that I was kind of like, it's okay. It was the only painting that sold at that show. Um, so I found it really important to take things that I don't love as well with me to the shows. But the other thing that taking things to shows and putting things on my website, which can always be a challenge for me to get things up on the website, because that is always a little tedious.
Just to plug you real quick, I'm going to make sure that I put the link to your website in the
Yes, thank
description,
you. Thank
as
you.
well as I know I want to hear what you're going to say, but you said that there's a store that you can purchase um,
Yes,
your
the
products in Western New York.
in
Um,
Western New York, in Hemlock, New York,
okay.
at the Little Lakes Community Center. Some of my smaller pieces are there. And my website, the ADHDartist.com.
Okay, I'll make sure to put all that
So,
information down in the
perfect. Thank
description, and
you.
please do continue. I just wanted to interrupt to make sure, because people are probably going to be like, well, where can I get it? We're
Where can
talking
we
about a
see it?
website, but
What did
where
she
is
do?
it?
Um, so one of the things that, I think is also very typical of people with ADHD, it is definitely a huge problem for me, is not finishing things. So in order to sell it, I won't sell something I haven't finished well. I don't want to sell something that doesn't have, clean, smooth edges and, varnish and whatever it needs to have on it. So in order to sell it, I have to finish it. And so that's one of the ways that I force myself. And I go through phases where I'll like create a bunch of art and then I'll spend several weeks just finishing pieces to get things done, because otherwise, I just don't. But I can't tell you, I couldn't count how many unfinished pieces are in the garage at the moment. And
It
most of
is
them will get finished, but a few may not. So
it is funny because everyone has such different taste. Even as I was looking at your jewelry, there's some pieces that I'm like, that is not for me.
yep.
But it's funny because some of the pieces that I was like, that's not for me, are the ones I saw others drawn to.
Yes.
And so, I mean, I'm very pink, glitter, basically a 9-year old's girl, but a 9-year old's bedroom. And but other people aren't.
Yeah.
So I guess it's the same thing. Just because you like a piece or don't like a
Yeah.
piece doesn't mean other people are going to feel the same way,
Exactly.
respectfully about it.
Exactly. And so so I try to make sure that even when I finish a piece that I'm kind of like, I don't love it. I make sure I finish it and take it to a show and try to sell it. Unless it's just really awful, there are pieces that get thrown out.
Is
And
it usually the quality versus the appearance that
yes,
you go with? Or
yes,
you know what I mean? Versus I just wouldn't put this in my house versus this
right.
is not good quality.
Right. Just because I wouldn't put it in my house doesn't mean I won't take it to a show. But if I mess something up or the paint dried too thick and cracked and or something happened with the varnish or whatever, that's the stuff that may not go to a show, that may get, reused or painted over, or, things like that. So, yeah.
I also thoroughly appreciate that both of us have ADD or ADHD,
Yeah.
and very much this is how this is goes. So, but I want to actually talk, and actually, I feel like I'm going to get on my soapbox because one of my biggest pet peeves, when I go to different art classes and everything, and one is those parents that are basically trying to do it for the kids. I'm always like, look at that. I don't care if it looks like a hot mess. It's the energy. It's if they love it, that's all that matters. But
Right.
another pet peeve is, and I understand it's a confidence thing. And luckily I've worked so much with art that I'm to a point where, my art looks nothing like the teachers. And
Right.
I'm okay with that because
Yep.
I don't need you to like it. I need to like it.
Yeah.
But are those people that are trying to do it exactly the same as the teacher, are trying to do it perfectly.
Right.
And I just kind of wanted to, we were talking about this before, how you lean into the mistakes, you
Yeah,
know?
I mean, you have to lean into the mistakes, and I'll say that, I kind of learned this through fluid art, so poured paintings. It was just something I wanted to try, and so I did it, and I will
Does
tell
your
you
cat
that
want to make an appearance just
yeah,
so everyone knows
apparently,
who's
apparently,
off stage?
the dogs are downstairs barking too. Um, so one of the things I find with poured paintings is that I always have sort of this idea, and the painting never comes out like the idea. It just doesn't ever. And but because I'm imagining something that's less poured painting and more an image, right? And that's just how my brain's working. So I'm picking the colors that go with that, but then when I actually like pour it out and blow it out or whatever I'm doing with it, it may come out completely different. Doesn't mean it's not pretty. Doesn't mean it's not a great piece of art. Doesn't mean it still doesn't represent what my idea was. Um but the other thing, I experiment so much. I experiment with combining techniques. I experiment with color. I experiment with, new art forms and new things. And, in making like textured paintings, like I'm constantly trying new formulas of, what I can use and what do I like and is it good for this? Is it good for that? And if you look in my art room, just in one cabinet, I have soft gel medium, heavy gel medium, extra heavy gel medium. I have texture paste, granular paste, fiber paste, sand paste, it's glass bead gel. Like it's a little bit of everything because you just play. Like it's more about play than it is about making art in the commercial sense of making art. And I really, I hope that people can get away from the idea that it has to look like the teachers. Now, making it look like the teachers is great when you're trying to learn a technique. So you learn that technique and you try to do it like the teacher. And I know you and I have both taken the Mandela art class. And you know what? Mine came out somewhat like the teachers. It wasn't perfect. My spacing wasn't exactly the same, but it looked a lot like the teachers. Um, but I learned the technique and then I came home and I poured out my own colors and started playing. And, sometimes it just doesn't look good. And sometimes, the cat walks across what you're doing. And
Or your cat breaks both your ornaments.
or your cat
Um,
breaks your ornaments or
I
whatever
was so
it
upset
is.
after my class. They broke both of them.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly. So, so there's some of that um sometimes mistakes just don't work. But you tried something and now you know that doesn't work. So try it a different way. Try it with a different kind of glue or a different kind of varnish or a different whatever it is and see if you can make it work the way you want. And so I experiment so much. I can't tell you, I have acrylic paints. I have so many different kinds of paint that are designed for different things. I have paint tubes that have ballpoint on the end. So they're like ballpoint pens, but they're tubes of paint. I have um glitter paints, and I have gloss paints, and I have matte paints, and I have dimensional paints, and I have because it's fun to just play with all those different things. And I know one of the paintings I took to the show that you were at was I literally was just testing all my new dimensional paints, and so it was just dots all over a canvas.
Loved it. Like every single person that came to your stand
Right.
commented and you're like, oh, it was just, they're like, it's fabulous.
I was just testing paint. I just wanted to
Yeah,
see what the colors looked like and how the dimensional worked and you know what it would feel like. And I did it on a I deliberately did it on a canvas I'd painted black so I could see all the colors really nicely. And it ended up being a cute little painting. It's just an 8 by 10 cheap canvas.
right.
I can sell it for 20, 25 bucks. But it was a test. It wasn't, wasn't trying to make a super impressive piece of art. And it's okay to use a stencil. God, I use stencils all the time. It's okay to use a mold. You don't have to be capable of making a beautiful sculpture out of clay that has, so much detail. It's okay to not have that particular skill. It's okay to do, that same thing, but make it abstract or geometrical or whatever it's going to be. It doesn't make you not an artist. You're still an artist, even if some of your skills aren't what classic art that's always taught in schools is intended. I did photography in high school. That was probably really the beginning of my journey of finding art mediums that I was capable of doing. Because when you're a kid, they teach you how to paint and they teach you how to draw, and they not everybody can do that. And so you can still be an artist and find other ways to create art.
That you talked about it being fun, and I just wanted to mention it, like, because there's times, I mean, an eyeshadow palette that you're done with, no one else wants it because hygiene, everything. There's times I've like, rough, I don't know what you want to call it, but basically destroyed it, put it on canvas, and just started like playing around. And I feel that we have with AI, and I'm not completely dismissing AI, but I feel that we keep moving away from humanity and into that perfection where it's got to
Yeah.
be perfect. And art isn't supposed to be perfect, it's supposed to have that humanity piece.
Yeah, and I think that's important. And I think the other thing that's important is we don't all have to be Michelangelo and Leonardo da Vinci. We can, and I'm going to say this, and I might get some backlash for this, but Thomas Kincaid paints pretty pictures. They're pretty. Who cares if they're commercial or whatever? They're pretty. I don't know how much skill he has or doesn't have, but just it doesn't have to be great art to be good art
That's
and
really
fun
interesting
art.
that you said that, because mine would never sell to anyone. And I probably shouldn't say anyone, but mine aren't meant to sell though. Mine
Right.
are because they make me happy. And it's funny because if you want to kind of extend it to music, I've always kind of I listen to all music. I think anyone from our generation, I mean, you're listening to some gangster rap and then you're listening to
All
some
of it.
Mozart, like we just listen
Yep.
to everything. But I always kind of got crap because I listened to teen bop music. Well, first of all, everyone, different horses for different courses. Is that the saying? I have a friend who says it all the time, but everyone's taste is different. Plus, if you looked into my backstory, well, why would I listen to real heavy metal? Because I lived in terror and horror my entire life. I
Right.
want something that takes me out of that.
Yep.
I don't want to lean into it. And it's funny that you mentioned that Thomas Kincaid, because that is there's people, I mean, or the Angettis.
Yeah.
There's people, all I could think of is The Office, where Oscars just completely repulsed the Angela Hasback. But everyone has their own taste. And what I think is fascinating, that if you really took time to understand everyone's backstory, it would make a lot of sense, the art that they are drawn to.
Right. And if it makes you happy, put it on your wall. If it makes you happy, put it on your wall or put it on your sofa table or wherever it needs to go. Because when you look at it, it makes you happy. Or if you wear it, it makes you happy. Like that's, or it reminds you of someone or something or a time or a place. That's okay. It doesn't have to be the Sistine Chapel. We don't all have a Sistine Chapel to paint. We
And
don't
let's be
all have,
honest, there's probably some that think that's terrible, that
wait,
that's not
yes,
good. You know?
exactly. Exactly. Why are there all those naked cherubs up there? I think people sometimes get this idea of what art is that, and then people look at, abstract art and they're like, oh, I could do that. I could, but, for some reason, Rothko's paintings really resonate with people. I don't know why. I can't tell you exactly why, but guess what? He's a very, expensive artist these days. I'm not ever going to be an expensive artist. That's okay. I just want to go out and explore with paint, yarn, fabric, ribbon, lace, everything else that I play with and make some things that make me happy and hopefully make someone else happy.
It's funny because I feel part of it is the energy behind the artwork. I mean, people, especially like, our abstract art and everything, like it's just a soup can.
Right.
But it resonates with people. One of my favorite paintings, and I don't know, I know it has a name. It's a very famous painting. All I can think of is the Partridge Family when I see it, but it's very primary colors with black lines.
Yep.
And I have to say, it's nothing I'd actually have in my house because it
Right.
doesn't go with a single thing in my house.
Right.
But that piece has always resonated with me. And literally, it's just, I mean, I don't want to dismiss the artist, but it almost looks like a kindergartner. Here's a red, a red square, and
Yeah.
like, and it resonates though.
And that's what it is. And every person in their emotional formative background is going to resonate with something differently, So I may look at, a picture of a bare tree and say, gosh, that's so beautiful. And somebody else may look at it and say, that's so depressing. And that's okay. We have different thoughts on it. You're not going to buy it. I might. So, and that's fine. And so when I'm making art, just because I don't love it doesn't mean somebody else might not. And so I'll take it with me and say, hey, this is stuff that I've made. And if it makes you happy, buy it from me. Like, and it's not about making a ton of money. It's basically about making enough to get more art supplies. So, you know, that's
Eat a
my life
little,
in a
yeah.
nutshell. I
Be
just need
able to
some
eat
more
a
paint.
meal or two.
Need some more paint, maybe dinner. Um,
Yeah.
and so that's what I do. And I just go out and I explore and I play and then I show people what I've done. And some people say, gosh, I really like that. I'd like to buy that from you. Okay, you can have it. And there are trying to think if there's any pieces I wouldn't let go of. I don't think so, because I think once I've made them, I've had my relationship. That's my relationship, is the making of it. And I really, even, 25 years in retail, the thing I always loved about retail was making other people happy. And so smiling at them and having a nice conversation and helping them get the clothes they need, or when I worked at a craft supply store, helping them figure out how they're going to make whatever it is they're going to make. I loved that. And, what kind of glue do I need for this? Well, gosh, this is, this will be the best for you. And here's some different techniques you could use to make this happen. Um, so making people happy. So if somebody sees something that I've made and they want it, I'll sell it. Not selling the dogs or the cats. But
I have
otherwise,
I have to say, watching you in your stand, or your booth, um, there were a couple of times because you would actually tell people your process, like where if you're looking at it from a business point of view, it's like you're basically putting yourself out of business because you're telling them how to do it themselves. But there's no ego there. It is you love art and you want others to love and create art. And it was
Yeah,
very
and
impressive to watch.
yeah, and that's something that I know a lot of artists who won't share their techniques or won't share, how they made something. I First of all, I just can't stop myself because I like to talk about it. But also, yes, if that's how you want to engage with artists by making it, then I will try to help you figure out how to make that work for you. And so I am happy to tell people, the supplies that I used for something and how I, make something happen. Um, and how I create pieces because that's how you're going to engage with it, and that's okay. Um, and some people, a lot of people come back and say, I just couldn't do it. Okay, so decoupage isn't going to be your thing, right? That's not going to be your thing. So what is your thing? And it just because you really like that piece over there, you're not going to be. I cannot sculpt a Michelangelo piece. Never in a million years could I take a chunk of marble, figure out what is inside it, and sculpt it. Can't can't do it. Can't make it. Can't even make it out of clay. That's not my thing. I
Right.
can appreciate it. I can buy a replica. Can't afford the original, but I could buy a replica. And if that's what I want to do, that's okay too. But for me, I've had to find other ways to engage with the art, to create art, um, that are not necessarily the classic techniques that people think of as art and artists. Um, but this doesn't make it not art.
I was just going to say define art. And like we said, like, everyone has different taste. And just because something's art to you doesn't mean it's art to me. And vice versa. Just because something's art to me doesn't mean it's art to you.
Yeah, and I mean, it could be decorative, it could be functional, it can still be art, right?
Well,
Um,
we're coming up on the holidays. We're recording this in August. But I mean, there's people that like their Halloween and their Christmas. I mean, it's quite a knack that they have. I mean,
yeah,
they really get into it, especially around here. It's impressive.
yeah,
Um, so, who's to say that that's not art? Because I think it is. If it's
right,
something that brings you joy and makes you creative, it's
yeah.
art.
And then one of the things you're talking about the holidays, one of the things I love to do, and I'm actually hopefully going to take a couple to a show that I do at Christmas time. I love to do Christmas trees. I love to decorate Christmas trees. And I make Christmas trees out of dress forms. And I'm sure you've seen them at this point where somebody takes a dress form and creates a skirt with garland or whatever and lights. And so I'm actually hoping to sell a couple of those this year. Um, but I love doing Christmas trees. I just, and they all have different themes. Every time I do a Christmas tree, it's got a different theme. I've done one that's got like purple burlap ribbon on it, and then
Wow.
there's all different flowers, not just Christmassy flowers, but all different flowers, and then bees and butterflies and all different insects and frogs and whatever on it. And it's such a pretty tree, and I haven't put it up for a couple of years, but I used to put that one up. So
How
um
cat friendly are those? Speaking as we both have
not
cats.
super because a lot of the ornaments are glass. And then, the Christmas tree that I do for myself that I've done years and years and years is it's usually some kind of red ribbon, maybe with poinsettias, some big poinsettia flowers, and I have hundreds of these little glass teardrops that I just put all over the tree.
Wow.
It's very sparkly. Um so that's another one that I like to do. And this year I bought a dress form that's it says Paris, and it's got, the Eiffel Tower and bicycles and things. So I'm gonna make a tree out of that and take it to the show. And it'll probably have, I don't know, it might have gold or red ribbon, but I suspect it's gonna have black and white ribbon, because the dress form is black and white. And then it'll have all sort of French themed
Oh,
ornaments.
wow.
So and black and white. So, you know, but that's I've always loved Christmas and Christmas trees. It's just one of my favorites.
I'm all about the Christmas music. I start it in
Me too.
October if I can. Uh, are there any tricks of the trade with your ADHD that have really kind of helped you be successful when having to live within the matrix? I mean, it's one thing when you're just at home with your art, but unfortunately, we still have to do like, matrixy stuff.
Yeah, we do. And so there's a couple things, and some of these things I learned to do before I realized and was diagnosed with ADHD, and some of them I've done since. And so one of them is, I know this is true for a lot of ADHDers. I am terrible with names. I am terrible with names, and I do not have great facial recognition. So when I was managing department stores, and you walk in the first day and you've got several hundred employees to get to know, the first thing I say to everyone at that first morning meeting, and I tell people over and over and over, please forgive me, it's going to take me several weeks to learn your name. And so if I get it wrong, just tell me what your name is. It's okay to correct me. I want you to correct me because I want to get it right. Um, and so that's always been a big one for me, is just be upfront with people and say, hey, this is how I function. And I apologize in advance, and correct me when I get it wrong. And
I
within a
like
couple
that.
weeks, I get everybody's names.
I like that though, because one, they're not taking it personally, but then also they're not afraid to do what you actually need is that
Exactly.
repetition
Yes.
of no, it's Dawnna.
Right.
So it helps both of you.
Yeah, and the same thing I've always said to new stores was, if I ever say anything that offends you, that upsets you, that comes out wrong, please tell me, because I don't always know, and that's probably less ADHD and more that I'm probably on the autism spectrum somewhere, that I sometimes make a joke that just doesn't land, but I don't realize it. And so please tell me if I've done something that offends you, and let's have that open dialogue so that I can not do that again. Because I don't
You
want to
know,
do that.
I think because I'm big on asking questions of people's intent.
Yep.
And one, because I mean, we just see it in the world today where someone, doesn't realize that what they just said was offensive
Exactly.
or, inappropriate. I mean, some of us grew up where things were said that, are not acceptable,
Right.
but we don't know because we grew up
Yep.
with it being acceptable. And to just start to ask questions and because someone might not know or I mean we were just talking about, I don't want to actually say the word because it'll involve trigger words but or trigger warnings, but there's a term that people use for when you're being um taken advantage of. And a lot of people, including myself, I just learned about 5 years ago, like, oh my gosh, that is offensive toward a whole
Right.
group of
Yep.
people.
Yes.
What a lot of us don't
Right.
know, and
Yeah.
I also have found that by asking questions, can you explain that a little bit more? You also kind of get a better feel
Yes.
if they're like, well, why are you being so sensitive? Or you're taking everything personally by
Right.
just asking a question, or you're being a problem, then maybe their intent wasn't
Right.
negative in that moment, but also that's a red flag that
Yep.
all I did was simply ask a question to understand you better.
Yeah.
And it's a problem for you.
Right.
So
Yeah. Now, working at retail, you work with so many people, and they're all different backgrounds, and they're all different ages. And, what you find sensitive, they don't find sensitive. What you don't find sensitive, they find sensitive. And it can be very challenging to try to put yourself in that person's shoes. But if they don't ever tell you what's going on, then you don't ever know, and so you don't know how to handle it. And so I've always tried to keep that open dialogue and make sure people know, always come talk to me. We can close the door. We don't have to talk to anybody else. Just come talk to me. Let me know how you're feeling, what's going on, and let's see how we can work it out. Um, and I always find that to be hugely important. The other thing that I do to deal with my ADHD, which most people probably cannot afford to do, and I'm incredibly lucky that I can. I have a friend who is very non-judgmental. Her father is also an ADHD artist, and she comes over every once in a while and helps me clean the house. And I don't have to worry when she comes in about what the house looks like because I have that whole executive dysfunction. Dishes will sit in the sink for days, weeks, maybe months. Garbage doesn't always get out to the curb, things like that. And so I'm incredibly fortunate to have a friend that can come and help me in those periods and help me get back on track, and help me get things organized and doesn't, look at me like I'm a problem because I have a hard time keeping my house clean.
I have to tell you, because I cannot afford to do that currently.
Yeah.
For me, the answer is just being as minimal as possible. I live alone, so I have two bowls, two plates,
Yep.
and that's how I've kind of in when you said like put things away, that's why I get it out of the house
Yep.
because then it'll get up to a point where then it will seriously impact my mental health.
Yeah.
So that was my workaround
And
that.
that is also true for me. I have a lot of stuff, but it's all relevant, almost all relevant. Um, I don't have little tchotchke things around the house. I just can't. The first time, in retail, I would get moved on a fairly regular basis. So, I have to pick up and move, and I'd have, 3 days to move and start in a new store. And the idea of having to pack and unpack all that stuff was just, I was like, just throw it out. I can't deal with it. And so I did get
Yeah.
very minimal. That being said, I have an awful lot of stuff. It's mostly books. Um, yeah, and art supplies.
Yeah, like I have a good section of books and a
Yeah,
collection of books, and well, something that helped me because I do enjoy like a few tchotchkes for the holidays or whatever. But I'll tell you what I do after each season, I donate them all.
yep,
And then it's kind of my ritual. Then I go to the dollar store or wherever,
yeah,
and I kind of just buy new each season. And
yep,
I also have a very small apartment. So, I mean, I'm talking like, it's
right,
like maybe 5 or 6 items.
yeah,
Um, because yeah, I can't just have boxes
yeah,
of stuff. I also grew up in a house where it was a hoarder's house, but not what you see on TV. It was
right,
very, very organized, and I mean, you could eat off the floors.
yeah,
Um, but it was just all this stuff. In fact, when we were going through my mom's stuff, it was okay. So here's a teapot. Will you open the teapot? And then there's all these other little boxes, things, and then
right,
there's stuff inside. Like it was like the Russian dolls, and I'm like,
yeah,
this is just
exactly,
so much stuff. I can't.
yeah, yeah,
It's just too much.
yeah, for sure.
So
And I do, my Christmas stuff. It might take me till March to take my Christmas tree down, but when I take it down, it all goes in clear. They have to be clear containers so that I can see what's in there. Because if I can't see what's in there, I just forget about it and then I buy it again because I forget that I have it. So I've gotten very good about only using clear plexi containers for things. That's how I store my yarn. It's all in clear plexi containers, so I can look and say, ah, I have it right there. I don't need to go buy it again. Um, and that was part of organizing the garage too, was we were separating, all these kinds of paints are in this one bin on this one shelf. And that's where it all is. And all the, epoxy clay is in this bin right here, and I can see it. And all the resins, because I use a bunch of different kinds of resin, they're all right here. And all the, mediums are in this one cabinet. And so I can go look in there and see if it's there. So, um, now that doesn't mean that when I use it, it's going to get put away, because that is not my skill. So it may or may not get put away. It may eventually take, my friend coming over and saying, let's clean up this part of the house. We'll get it done. Um, so I'm really fortunate to have that ability to have somebody come
Yeah.
over and help me with that. Um, and I also deal with some health issues that can limit my stamina in any given day and how much I'm able to accomplish in any given day. And, for me, that might be I'm going to go do a painting instead of I'm going to do the dishes. And so the dishes don't get done for another day, but I did a nice painting. So that can be a little challenging too. So, um, but the ADHD executive dysfunction is very strong in me, and so that can be super challenging. And what everybody says, oh, you get these apps and you make a schedule and you whatever. I know who wrote the schedule, and
I'm amazing at making schedules.
oh
It's
yeah,
actually, well, I actually want to use this as a good opportunity to talk about how one of the things with like mental health diagnoses and everything, and I'm going to use the show Criminal Minds because it is kind of one of the worst ones that watch an episode where the person has bipolar, borderline, schizophrenic, like, and so you see that in your head.
yep,
And there's that stigma and that shame around mental health. But
yeah,
I have to tell you, I mean, you and I, like, we both, have ADD or ADHD, but how we deal with it, how we function, in our day with it, completely different. Not every, like, just because someone has the same diagnosis as someone else
right,
does not mean that they are going to be exactly the same. And I guess it's me getting on my soapbox because it is hard,
yeah,
being diagnosed with mental illness. And you just saw Criminal Minds
right,
where people are going to think that you're, and the worst thing that Criminal Minds does is they like analyze it. They're like, oh, well, someone with bipolar, they do this, so that
right,
means, and it's this like stereotype.
yeah,
And that's not, I mean, it's kind of like, with bipolar or schizophrenia, any of them, there are people on, even autism. It's
yes,
a spectrum.
yes, and even
It's not.
the one I always think about is psychopath. Just because you have psychopathy, and again, that's a spectrum, that doesn't mean that you are a terrible person. It means that you might be, watching other people to learn how to react because you don't innately know how to react to something, but it doesn't make you a terrible person. And yes, and right along with that is the stigma of it. I will tell you that when I said I'm going to name my company the ADHD Artist, my mom said, "Are you sure you want to do that? Do you really think people will like be okay with that? That they'll come to your booth and buy your art if it's ADHD?" And you know, new generation, I was adamant, yes. The reason it's the ADHD artist is because when you look at my booth at a show, there's a little bit of everything. This isn't so and so's paintings, or fiber arts. It's not just that. There's a little bit of everything. And the only way to explain that is the ADHD, right? I
I
do all
have
these
to,
things because of the ADHD. And as an artist at shows, I have had more wonderful conversations with people, adults who've never been diagnosed, adults who have been
yes,
diagnosed late, parents of kids, college students, teenagers coming up and saying, "Oh my gosh, I love the name." And we talk about ADHD and what that means, and that you can do lots of interesting things with ADHD once you understand how your brain works and take advantage of that. So you have to mitigate the things that can be difficult and take advantage of the fact that your brain works differently from other people.
I have
That's a
to
big
say,
deal.
just just witnessing those conversations, you're defaming it, you're normalizing it. And I mean, there were so many people that came up to you and just share, I mean, just poured their heart out. And a couple of the conversations, I just felt that this was not a conversation that they
Right,
felt they could have with anyone else. But
right.
here you are throwing it, you know, I don't want to say throwing it in your face, but it's right there. There is
It's
no
right there. Yeah.
hidden, you know, you're not trying to keep it in the shadows. And I have to say that, you know, with my own CPTSD, that it helps me because you're not ashamed of who you are.
Right.
And a lot of times, like you said, with your, you know, your mom's was not wrong. There are people that look at that
Absolutely.
and it's, you know, I mean, I was just in therapy and I mean, there's still things that after 30 years of nonstop trauma that I'm still working at
Right.
42. And I mean, the things that people have said, like, and it's like, what if you put yourself in someone else's shoes? You don't know someone else's story.
Right.
And I find we use the word narcissist and narc. I mean, literally, it's just a blanket statement for anytime someone's a jerk. And
And anytime somebody wants to focus on themselves, which, you know what, sometimes it's okay to focus on yourself. Sometimes you have
absolutely. And I don't want to speak for you, but I know I grew up where putting yourself first was considered a sin. I grew up in the Baptist church. That was a sin and it was egotistical
right,
but because of that, then you put yourself absolutely last and then you just burn right out.
right.
You know, and
Yeah,
it's that
exactly.
de-shaming
Yeah,
and also not stereotyping. I
yeah,
mean, there are people that struggle with narcissism and they're working very hard to, heal themselves from that.
exactly.
And I just recently was talking to someone, their child has object defiance disorder.
Yes,
And they were told by the mental health professionals, by the way, neither her or I are mental health professionals. I just
right.
want to give that warning, but that there is no cure for it and there's nothing that can ever be done. He is always going to have it. And I said to my friend, I'm like, don't ever tell him that
Yeah,
because one, I don't agree with that.
right.
Anyone can change
Yeah,
anything. And second of all, imagine being told that and same thing with narcissists. Why would a narcissist heal? Because we're told that they will never change.
right.
So if you're told that this
Yeah,
is the way it is and there's nothing you can ever do about it,
yeah.
why would you attempt to heal?
Well, and that's, ADHD, there's nothing I can do about it. I probably could take medications, but what would that do? It might help certain parts of things, but it doesn't take away the underlying diagnosis. But but for me, it's looking at all of those things as, how does that make my brain special? What
Right.
perspective does that give me that's different from the perspective people without ADHD have? So that's how I like to look at it. And I've also been diagnosed with depression, severe depression at times. And all of those things give me a perspective that's different from other people. And it might be because my depression is not as severe as some people. My depression might be more severe than other people. The ADHD manifests itself, I think, a little bit differently in everyone. And, so there may be some generalities that you can speak about. Um, but I think a lot of times, I don't think I think it would be difficult to be diagnosed with ADHD as a kid now because you get shunted a certain direction a lot of times. And I think what's really important about all these diagnoses, autism, ADHD, everything, is that you understand how that makes you unique and what can you learn from it that is positive. Like how does that make you special in terms of, for me, how my brain works, how I think about things, how I think about the world. um Sure, it's a pain in the butt that I forget to do my dishes, I forget to brush my teeth, I forget to take my meds, all sorts of things because I'm, going to take my meds and I get distracted because the dog wants to go out and then I, Google something and I forget what I'm doing and all of a sudden I'm off, making a piece of art and I haven't done what I intended to do. Um, so that can certainly be challenging, but it also makes it really cool in certain ways, in the way I look at things and how I make connections and the creativity that I sometimes have that, you want somebody who thinks outside the box and gosh, I'm going to think outside the box. The flip side is, and this is funny because I just saw a meme about this, that I'm the person who can tell you everything that might go wrong with your plan, right? Which in certain environments is a great thing. In retail, it sounded like a bad attitude because I would say, but what about this? This could happen and this might go wrong. I think this is going to happen, blah, 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 blah. And people would think, well, you're just poo-pooing it because you don't want to do it. No, I legitimately am trying to show you the pitfalls of the direction we're headed so that we can mitigate them so we
Right.
can move forward. So sometimes it's really hard for other people to see, um, I'm going to call it that light that you have, or that special um, ability that you have. And so sometimes you have to like try to teach somebody what that means. And sometimes they'll get it and sometimes they won't.
I have to say, I like how you said what I was attempting to say earlier is not that you might not always have the diagnosis, but that there's hope that it's not, you have this diagnosis and now, and I'm going to be honest, because I've been through in and through the whole mental health
Yeah,
community thing, being thrown in a group home, like that it was literally, you're just going to be on 25 meds. You're never going to get married. You're going to live in a group home forever. And I'm living proof that is not the
that's
case
the case.
in
Yeah.
any way, shape, or
Yeah.
form. And I also wanted to reflect a bit on what you were talking about, because you are the person that if I wanted to know what all the pitfalls, you are very detail oriented. I am in no way, shape, or form detail oriented. In fact, there's been times, I don't think you would mind me sharing, her and I are accountability buddies,
Yeah.
Melinda and I are. And I'll have an idea, but I'm someone that's an idea. And then I'm just, do you remember the Cajun cook from on PBS?
Yeah.
Well, he would throw spaghetti at the wall to see what
Yeah.
stuck. That's very much me. And
Yeah.
actually, so I'll have this idea and I'm just like in my little like Pisces, woohoo. And Melinda's always already like Googling it. She's like, okay, well, train rides to New York City are this
Right.
is how much a plane. And she already has it planned. And
Yeah.
it's funny because that's how, like, that works for you. That
Right.
de-stresses you.
Yeah.
It does the opposite for me. I'm like,
Right. Well,
I was just going to figure it out when it happened.
and the other part of it is that, I'm really good at planning and I'm really good at coming up with ideas, and I can give you an incredibly detailed plan of how everything should work. Don't ask me to execute it.
Okay. See, I
I'm
don't
not going
even
to execute
attempt.
it.
I'm like, okay, well, I guess I'll
I'm,
start with,
I'm
okay.
gonna get to that day and say, I think I want to stay home. And I'm not going to execute it. And that used to happen in retail. Like I was like, oh, we should do this whole wall that's just this and da 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 da. And I'd be like, can you do that? Because I'm not going to go move all those shelves. I'm not going to put all that merchandise up. Somebody else needs to do that. But this is what it should look like when you're done.
Well, I have to say, that with like the details and the execution, you are great. Like if you were gonna buy, if I was gonna buy something expensive, I would go to you because we were talking about this, how you will actually read the ratings, the descriptions, the reviews. Me, I type it in Amazon or wherever. I'm like, that one looks okay. It's in my price range. I'll get it. And I mean, I'll wind up with like a mini Barbie, teapot
Yeah.
or, washing machine or whatever.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, well, I'll donate this and we'll try again.
Right.
Like, that's kind of my, like, there's no research involved.
There's some of that for me too sometimes, but for big purchases, it's definitely the, doing the research and thinking about like what features do I actually need? What features do I not need? What, does it have this? Does it have that? I mean, I bought a toaster oven recently, right? And I was like, okay, but it has to have the dehydrator, and if I'm gonna spend the money on it, I have to be able to do this and this and because my toaster, I dropped my toaster and my toaster broke. Typical me. Um, so, but I had to go do my research, and then I narrowed it down to like three. And then I was like, okay, well, what are the pros and cons of these three? Well, these two are practically the same toaster, and this one, so yeah, yeah.
It's
And
way
then
I am.
the toaster has been sitting on my porch for the last 3 months.
It's very helpful having you as an accountability buddy because, like, kind of the problems that you wouldn't think of, and
Right.
I'm like, I'll figure. I'll get a text from you at 7 in the morning. I was thinking, and I'm like, it's 7 a.m. So you woke up thinking, you're like, yeah, because it was just, rattle around in my head. You should do X, Y, Z. But it's nice because I'm not detail oriented. So especially
Right.
when I start editing these videos and everything,
Yeah.
you're gonna be like, you need to be on call. Be prepared.
I will be, but don't ask me to do the editing because I'll just be like, yeah, I'm sure it's fine. I don't execute well. I
I
just
think
don't.
mine comes from trauma where I had to be detail oriented. But I
Right.
think naturally I'm not. I mean, even if you look at my painting, like it's, just kind of everything in my life.
Yeah.
It's well, I'm also that Pisces, like, how does this feel?
Right.
Versus like, is this practical or,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah,
um,
exactly.